Okay, we're ready to start the continuation of the public hearing for 253. Actually, this is a public meeting on the blasting plan for 253 Meadowbrook, not a public hearing. And my understanding is that we have gotten a blasting plan. We've received a blasting plan. And we have also received some concerns about the plan. And so what I'd like to try and do is to frame the discussion in a way that hopefully will resolve the concerns of the applicant and the concerns of the abutters. And I think the basic position is what the planning board can ask for above and beyond the statutory requirements, if anything. Because I think the contention of the applicant is that the blasting plan that they submitted is consonant with the statutory requirements for that activity, and that therefore they're not obligated to.
Actually, it's gone beyond.
Well, okay. But they've got. Well, maybe we can get into that a little bit. But the question then is, what can the board ask for, and under what circumstances, to alleviate the concerns of the abutters, and to what extent is the applicant willing to meet those concerns, even if it means going beyond the statutory limitations. And so when we talked about this at the last meeting, what we talked about was a couple of things. The concerns of the abutters are that the blasting activity is going to damage their house. What can be done to alleviate the initial concern that the activities are going to create damage? How can that be recorded, or not, if there is no damage? And what remedy do they have if they feel that there has been damage? Would you say that's a fair statement?
Yes. That's a statement of the concerns they've expressed, yes.
Yeah. So the question is, what would they need to alleviate the concerns that they have, and how far is the applicant willing to go to address those concerns, so that we don't all wind up in a pickle later, but we have reassurance on the one hand from both parties. What I heard personally in the last meeting, the last hearing, was that the applicant would be willing to accept the report of their independent of the Garrity's independent appraiser, and would be willing to place sensors in certain locations that the abutters feel are sensitive in detecting movement and changes in their houses. And I think there were 3 abutters or near abutters that were concerned. I think that's what you felt that comfortable extending to the abutters. Is that a fair statement?
Both came up last time. The answer to the first request is yes. They've had photographs taken. And I think Andy Dufour is here from Maine Drilling Blasting. Ken Smith could not make it tonight. They would be willing to work with those as an indication of the condition now. We would like to have a set of copies of those photographs now, so we have the evidence now of the baseline. If there's a copying cost, we'll pay the copying cost. So I think that's how I understood that request, and yes, that is fine. Number two, and Andy can expound upon this, but I'm going to call them, I don't have the technical word, I'll call them crack measurers.
Yeah, the crack monitor.
To see how much movement in and out. We spoke with Ken Smith last time outside when we left, and he said for a crack monitor to work, you have to measure it after every single blast. You have to go into the house and measure it after every blast, because he said these are not, these cracks are, as it is, they're constantly moving in and out, both with weather, weather in that day and then with the season. And he said, so he also said that in 37 years he's never put a crack monitor inside a house. But the bottom line is we were talking about, we looked at, Joe nicely gave us 2 other blast management plans. Each one of those only provided 1 seismograph for test blast, and then for monitoring it as things go on. We're going to be furnishing 5. And those have to be checked after every blast. And it was explained to me if then on top of that, after every single blast, you're trying to get in every single house, because even if you measure it the next day, the crack measurer is not accurate, because those things are constantly moving. And Andy, if you want to change anything, I'm saying
no, you're right.
You have to get in right.
On the point.
What they're usually used on public works projects outside the building, but
Outside on foundations, things of that nature. And there are days when we'd be blasting 2 or 3 times a day, which we'd have to gain access, multiple times throughout the day. And even if we weren't blasting on a particular day, we'd still need to get in and measure and look at the crack monitor due to the varying conditions that Jonathan just stated, with temperature, things of that nature. Everything's constantly moving. So in order to create that,
you need to get in both before and after each blast.
Before and after each blast, and then on a
Twice
daily.
for each blast.
Yeah. Plus, if it was a day we weren't shooting, we'd still want that measurement. And plus, these monitors would cause they have to be adhered. Typically, we do it on concrete with epoxy, on foundations where you can just scrape them off after. If we were to do this on finished surfaces within houses, it would cause damage, when we removed them. Plus, you'd have this unsightly monitor in your house. But there would be, it's strip paint, drywall, in the removal process.
But the most important thing was a time factor and a gaining entrance factor. But
Yeah.
as it is, it's time consuming on these seismographs after each blast. And those use most projects, and I looked at the state regs, it's one per job. That's all that's required.
At the nearest structure, yeah.
At the very nearest structure, we're going to have 5 in there, and those have to be monitored after every blast.
Every blast.
It was a time problem, it was an entrance problem. I didn't even hear this third problem last week, which is, might damage the walls, but it was the first 2 that presented a real issue. Yes, it did come up last time, and when it was brought up, it sounded like it was workable, but then we talked outside, and it's just not practical.
Can I just make sure I understand? So if you have 5 seismographs, every blast, let's say you have a day where 3 blasts, that's 5 people must go into the houses at that point in time. You said that you can
The seismographs will be exterior. That's what we typically use at a blast.
All
The
right,
crack
so you won't have
monitors.
people going in.
We do have people entering the property, but
And the property.
not interior. It'll be on the exterior foundation.
Right, because I was just going to be in there anyway, but they're not. It's an exterior monitoring, but it still
Yes.
requires, after every blast, someone has to go and do the
Yes,
reading?
yes. You'll have to document the reading. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I asked Joe to check with town council as to what the limits under this kind of situation are, the limits of the planning board are with respect to making conditions on blasting. And I'll just take a minute to read what town council responded to us with here. This is an email that came in today from Joel Bard, responding to questions from Joe Layden. Joe, in the short time available, I can only provide a general response. You asked two questions, one related to the condition imposed for 153 Meadowbrook, and one more general. In response to the board's condition, it is my opinion that the condition sets out a clear process for requiring that the applicant give the board a blasting and crushing management plan, that the applicant meet with the board to review the plan, and that the abutters have advance notice of any blasts. I have not had time to review the state-mandated procedure for permitting of blasting, but I recall that the process runs through a town's fire chief. That process is where the technical aspects are reviewed. In light of this existing protocol, I believe that the planning board's condition treads a reasonable middle ground by requiring a public forum for blasting information and notice. While avoiding the technical elements which are governed elsewhere, I would be concerned about the planning board entering that arena. For example, the reference in your email to surveys could lead the board into the technical field. Your general question about the possibility that the board might require that future applications provide additional information and retain consultants for evaluating blasting as part of the site plan approval would concern me for the reasons described above. The board has the ability today to review land use impacts of blasting in terms of how the proposed reconfiguration of the site and the use of the site complies with existing standards. Again, as a general proposition, it is my opinion that the board need not solicit or review technical data that would involve evaluating the blasting itself. If there is interest in this issue, the board can invite the fire chief to attend the site plan public hearing to discuss the technical aspects of any proposed blasting. And in connection with Joel's second paragraph, I actually went back and looked at the planning board standards for site modification. I'm just going to find them. The planning board standards. This is section 11 of the zoning bylaw, paragraph F. Planning board shall review and evaluate the application and make a determination as to whether it is consistent with the standards and criteria listed below. If the planning board finds that these standards and criteria have been met and the planning board does not make any of the findings set forth in subsection E, it shall approve the application with or without conditions. The standards and criteria are as follows. The development shall be integrated into the existing terrain and surrounding landscape. Building sites shall, to the extent feasible, minimize the use of wetlands, steep slopes, floodplains, hilltops, preserve natural or historic features, maximize retention of open space, preserve scenic views from publicly accessible locations, minimize tree vegetation and soil removal, blasting, and grade changes, screen objectionable features from neighboring properties and roadways. So, under those circumstances, I think the planning board could say that while on the one hand it is accepting a proposal for blasting and making substantial changes in the topography of the site, but the trade-off on that is that we want to be sure that the neighbors, the abutters, are comfortable that they are going to be protected as a result of the blasting and that they are going to be recompensed if any damage occurs. While that may not be strictly stipulated in the state mandate, it is stipulated in the zoning bylaw that there is a trade-off here. You want to do a lot of blasting. It's 30 days worth of blasting. You've got neighbors that are very close, and they want to be reassured that the impacts on them are not going to be deleterious. So my question to you is, how do we do that?
I guess immediate response is obviously the decision has already been set down, and the criteria you look at when you made the decision was minimize blasting. I know in the public hearing we didn't have a lengthy discussion, but we discussed at some length blasting versus hammering. And I think there was a lot of shaking of head yes, and I don't think Mr. Conway here.
He's right there.
And I think he even agreed that people who've experienced hammering versus blasting, when all is said and done, have preferred the blasting. It's quicker and it's actually less disruptive than the hammering. I think we've had that discussion. The discussion was we'll do the blasting. So the question of, all right, so we're doing blasting, what do we do about the neighbors' concerns? I'm not certain if that falls under the category of minimizing blasting. But I hear their concerns. We've met privately on those concerns and publicly, and we heard last time how the blasts that are being done here are, and Mr. Dufour can go there, are well below the state limits. I read the regs before I came here. The limits are intended to prevent damage to houses next door. So I'm hoping that gave some confidence. I know with blasting there'll never be absolute confidence, but they now have their permit since we were last here. But they did explain how this blaster. I don't know if blasting companies differ as far as how much below the standards they set their blast, but this one is way below.
It's significantly below, and in the document you have it states that. And I know you didn't want to get into the technical nature, is what you said, but if you do look, we're predicted peak particle velocities of 0.05, 0.08, and 0.12.
What are the state standards?
The state standards are 2.0. So we're less than 10% the safe limits.
Right.
So I think that addresses a lot.
The real concern, and forgive me if I'm mischaracterizing, but I think the real concerns here are what happens. I mean, nobody wants for there to be damage. I mean, I think the neighbors recognize that there's risk that there might be damage. The question is, how do we document it so that the neighbors don't go chasing wild geese if they need to have repairs done to their houses as a result of the blasting activities? Is that a fair characterization? Is that
It is.
fair?
Can I make a comment? I'm Jim Garrity of the neighbor end. I don't think that we are particularly up in arms thinking that your blasting is going to violate state statute. Yes, you understand that. You guys keep focusing on that as if that's our objection. It ain't. Very simply, is it just a step back a minute? And I'm saying this is without knowing the law, it's just common sense. The planning board has zoning laws regarding the height of the building, the setback of the building, the square footage of the building, blah, 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 when a guy buys a lot. That's because he has to adhere to. For some reason, when you're changing the topography, it's a significantly more dramatic act, obviously, than the size of the structure you're going to build on it. There's no other. It seems to me that suddenly everything reverts to whatever. Well, if it meets state code, you're just out of luck, Mr. Garrity, to a degree. I mean, that's kind of what your predecessors have said. You haven't. I don't mean to word it that way. Understand, we are taking, and the Beckers are also, the neighbors literally, and I'm not charging you, we're taking all the pictures off the wall, all the glass crap out of cabinets so it doesn't fall over, storing it, wrapping it. I mean, this is not the same as if it was just a structure going on next door. We wouldn't do anything like this. My concern, very simply, we do have a firm, we're putting a line on it now, actually, little background is the firm that was recommended to us to do a survey of our house. It develops, who's incidentally speak very highly of you guys, has a conflict of interest, and has suggested that we go to someone else. So we haven't conducted this pre-blast survey, and would like to share with you the results of
That's
that.
not quite true, Jerry. We have had an independent home.
We have had some pictures, that's right, yeah. This isn't an exercise to try and stick it to you people at all. What I'm concerned about is that 60 blasts from now, all, for the sake of discussion, 70% of state standard, way below, and my septic system snaps. And you guys, what I don't want to run into is you guys say, listen, hey, we met code, Mr. Garrity. I don't know, but that's just luck. It's just your bad luck with the septic. Because I have examples of a neighbor of Debbie Gates who lives a mile and a half away from some blasting in Meadowbrook School. It happened. She sits on the same ledge. Her cast iron, albeit old, drain pipe snapped when they were blasting, and the blaster basically said, "Pound sand, you're too far away. You have no claim." And now, it's conceivable it was a coincidence. I don't think it was, and probably you don't either in your heart of hearts. I don't want to run into that. That's all I'm trying to avoid at this point. It's enough of a headache as it is. We have a dog who's terrified at loud noises. I mean, I've got all kinds of issues that I really shouldn't be facing if someone's building a house next door. Above and beyond normal construction exigencies, for lack of better words. So that's really what I'm after, and I think Mr. Becker would agree with me. Is we're looking for as complete a survey as we can possibly get, and say, okay, just so we don't get into the row, it was that way before we started, and you're making this thing up. This is a revenue claim you're pulling on me, Garrett. Insofar as we possibly can, we'd like to have the entire thing, documented, your agreement, saying, yeah, everything that's there is accurate. That's the case. And then I kind of want, you can't do this statutorily, I don't think. I kind of want agreement. I don't want to get an argument if here's where we get subjective. If justice is on my side on the claim, I don't want to hear, it was just a coincidence, your septic pipe snapped, or your I don't know what the hell goes on, or your crack in the wall doubled, or on and on. I don't know, that scares me as to what can happen. I have no way of knowing whether, it's totally conceivable to me that my house is not built to withstand blasts that are 75% state code. The state didn't come into my house to look, obviously, and built in 1918. God knows what it was built for. I don't know.
So Jimmy,
that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
No, I understand. But the question is, what is it? What would make you feel comfortable? That's
nothing. As far the best you can do is just what we've discussed here, which is we will get a complete survey. We're happy to share it with you, instead of having to give you access to the house.
We've had a survey.
And we're going to get a second. Don't you want a second survey, my dear?
No, we've had.
We'll give you whatever we have. In other words, we're not withholding.
No, we've had a home inspector that took a very different approach from the blaster's subcontractor who came in. I think they agreed at the last meeting that they would accept it, which is great. I'm happy with that. I'm sorry to hear that because it's too time consuming to put a crack, monitor in the thing. I don't know enough about it, which is why I was interested and wrote Joe, who nicely replied to me, about getting an independent consultant for us, not to review or criticize your blasting plan, but to review it from the point of view of the Garrity's house. What do the Garrity's need to insist upon, be it at the expense of the blasters or the Wetterhouse or whoever, for common sense purposes? I don't know. I'm sorry, I have no technical ability. The plan from Joe came to us on Friday. I've tried my best to get a report, couldn't do it yesterday. But I don't know if there's such a thing as an electronic sensor that can be put under our crawl space where the septic pipe comes into the house, under a crawl space, that if there is a crack occurs from one of these 100 blasts, will sound out and go down to the Wayne so he could stop the blasting. I don't know whether it exists or it doesn't exist. I'm happy to have your people come in and take a look at a machine, at whatever it is that could be put in that crack in my living room to monitor it. Because if it goes way up after blast number 10, something could be wrong with your blasting plan and maybe it should go back for review. I don't know the answers to this. That's why I was asking for some help to just work through it. I'm not trying to stop you. I can't stop you. I'm just trying not to have a situation where I come home and my basement is full of sewage, or a pipe is burst and the ceilings have fallen down. I can't stand that. I'm proactive and
having seismic data close by the house would tell you what kind of force was exerted on, your pipes, your foundation.
Is that
of the
enough?
house.
If it's
Well, wait a minute.
outside, I don't know.
Now, cast iron pipes, I mean, you're an engineer, correct me if I'm going down the wrong way. Foundations of different kinds of foundations, all have sort of a rating that would, be expected to withstand that sort of thing, if it's up to stuff and things.
Mhm.
If it's cast iron pipe from 1918, you might be thinking about, you might want to change that anyway pretty soon, because that's a long time for cast iron. I only know that because I had a crack in one in another house that I owned before. It wasn't that old. So, knowing what the conditions are now, and knowing what they are as the blasting takes place, I think is your safest bet.
I still haven't been told by you or anybody else, are there other actions that the homeowners can take? We've heard that the crack machine is time consuming. I'm sorry if it is, but if that would give me
The little
peace.
crack thing which goes on the wall also is not designed for interior walls. It would damage interior walls. That's what I heard.
That's correct. And if you have that crack documented with photographs and.
But why would you put, and I'm just a straight question, this isn't an argumentative one, why wouldn't you put a seismic measuring device in a basement?
In the interior?
Yeah, we're happy to have it, we wouldn't object.
Yeah, they're meant to be affixed to the exterior of the foundation because that's where the force.
Well, wouldn't it measure the vibration if it was
Initiates.
on the floor of the basement?
No,
I'm ignorant.
it would. It's all meant
I
to
believe you.
be exterior. We don't put seismographs on the interior
You
structures.
don't, but
no.
on the basement floor.
No.
You say you're putting on walls, not floors?
The exterior foundation wall.
Okay,
So
Yeah.
they actually mount it to the
We
foundation?
will epoxy it right to the foundation.
So it's actually glued to the foundation?
but you see, our, and that's great, and I appreciate that, I don't mean to take that lightly. What I'm saying is what concerns me is kind of, what you touched on. If my old cast iron pipe, which arguably at some point is going to break, it's been there since 1918, it's been there since 1975, since we bought the house. And if it breaks because you blasted, and it wouldn't have broken otherwise, not the odds were, it probably would have gone another, till I die. And I'm not that near, I hope, but someone there. And I'm just saying, are you guys going to say, well, I'm sorry, that was just a subpar plumbing, Mr. Garrity, you've got a problem.
Jim,
You don't. I don't want that to happen.
The difference there would be you're right next door. I've talked to some people, names I can't use, on Miss Gates. They, 201, say absolutely not. I know you keep talking about that situation. She's so far away. They say absolutely not. There's a reason that
Well, absolutely not what?
that blasting did not cause her problem. I know you've for
Debbie
a number
Gates
of
we're
months.
talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're talking about Debbie Gates. But yours is different. You are right beside. If there's a blast and your pipe, it's almost common sense. If there's a blast and you have a cracked pipe the
Yeah.
same day,
Yeah.
they caused it.
Well, but what I've been hearing them say, just for the record, is if it meets code, Mr. Garrity, pound sand. If you had a problem, it's because of your fault because of subpar construction.
If we break it, we're
May
going
well
to fix
be,
it. And that's the reputation you spoke of earlier. I mean, if we do damage, we will fix it. We're not going to tell you to pound sand.
I mean, the issue is, I guess what I'm trying to make clear here is I'm not suggesting negligence. What I am suggesting is liability is what I'm focusing on. So there's no thought that you'll do, you might, but I mean, I'm not really terribly up in arms that you'll do something wrong. I'm
Just a second, this man's had his hand up.
Sure.
one
Dan,
time.
my question is, we're going to have one of these seismographs put on our foundation, and what sort of communication are we going to have from you if it's higher than it's supposed to be? Are you just going to go back and sort of turn it down, or are you
You'll be
going to tell
notified.
us, gee, we were up today and...
The fire
Yeah.
department will let you know.
We
immediately.
keep talking about state regs, but we have to report that to the fire chief, and you will be notified.
By the fire chief?
And we will notify you also, but you will be notified by the
Joe,
fire
Did you
chief.
get
And
that
blasting
letter
will stop.
from Captain Robinson?
Yep.
I guess
So we'll be notified during the period of time when it happens, rather
Yeah,
than...
if we're doing 2 blasts a day and we haven't exceeded on blast number 1, we won't be doing blast number 2 that day. we have to report it, and we have to reevaluate the blast plan and come up with a solution.
I guess what I'm saying, Andy, is if it can be demonstrated that there's damage that occurs somehow, and that'll be demonstrated, and a reasonable man, this becomes somewhat subjective, would say, yeah, it was caused by the vibration of the blasting, not the excessive vibration, just the vibration. Are you guys prepared to accept that liability? At least kind of for the public record, I guess.
I will say yes to the public record
Yeah.
that if we do damage due to blasting
Thank you.
and we are negligent, we will fix
Well, not
it.
negligent.
Well, even
because
not even, you're responsible even if you're not negligent. If you're blasting, damages his pipe.
Well, I think the Wetterers have also fessed up to that with agreements with you, Jim. I mean, we stepped
No,
forward
that was-
outside of the planning board and
Yeah,
made
but-
agreements.
But it's.
Which are signed and in place.
You don't even have to
We're
prove negligence.
mincing words a
No,
little
no,
bit,
I'm
because,
not trying to
because
prove
But I'm saying you don't have to.
does he have, what I think he's asking is, does he have to prove that it's because of blasting that the damage occurred?
Thank you.
Where is the burden of proof? He goes to you and he says, you know what, this crack wasn't here yesterday, you blasted today, and now there's a crack, it's gotta be, I think it's because of the blasting, and you say, prove it. That's what he's worried about. I think that's what they were all worried about.
No, if
So-
that crack did not show up in the pre-blast survey we conducted, and now there's a crack, and we've been blasting, then we need to fix the crack.
Okay,
This
that's
is-
what
yeah,
I'm looking for.
I
that's
think
the
that's the
reason.
reassurance that they're on the record that
But
they're.
but what
so-
about the
So you're
crack
gonna-
is
you're
bigger?
gonna
Your
need-
people
excuse
didn't.
me, You're gonna need to crawl under their, someone's gonna need to crawl underneath their crawl space and check for that area where their septic pipe is. Because I think you had mentioned last time that their survey person did not do that. And I mean, you're not gonna dig up the
Well,
pipe.
we did.
and inspect
We
it.
have done that, I think, haven't we, Melissa?
And the attic.
And
Yes,
have the
we've
pictures,
done it.
we'll share that with you.
Yeah, but.
But there was an issue with
but the
chimney
sep-
as well.
But the septic pipe is hopefully underground, right?
It's just where it goes into this foundation, as far as I know.
Right, but,
So they photographed that,
Yeah.
you're saying.
So just so that you have that pre-knowledge.
But what we don't want is another meeting back here where they're saying tomato, you're saying tomato.
You can't resolve that. I hate to say it.
Well, what we're saying, I think, is that if there's a reasonable baseline that everybody can agree to, and blasting is occurring, and a change occurs in that baseline, that a reasonable man would say that the damage is the result of the activity, and that therefore the people responsible for the activity are responsible for the damage. I think they're looking for that assurance.
So the most important thing then is to establish the baseline, Al.
That's right.
So if Jimmy, if you and Melissa have got more extensive photos, it's in his best interest.
You have full
Who's-
access to it, that's not.
Who's got the insurance, $10 million worth of insurance, okay, which would more than cover his foundation and septic. If he's responsible for any issues, then he's more interested in getting better photographs than anybody.
Absolutely.
So
quite
I'm just,
frankly.
my general comment is I'm just astonished, I mean, this is a side editorial almost, I'm astonished that something like this, which is infinitely more intrusive than any other aspect of a neighboring construction, has so few protections on it compared to the protections we do get with the neighboring construction, the height, setback,
Well, there are quite a few, I mean, but they are part of state law and are regulated by the fire department, not by,
The other thing you
They're
have to
They're not
remember,
addressing the butters, all they address is
Jim,
what
yeah.
they think is legal.
the thing you have to remember is probably no more than half of the blasting projects in town come through this board. The other ones have just state statute.
I mean, I remind you, John, we blasted and blew out the Becker's pool. I
Yeah.
mean, and that was well below mass code.
And yours
But
was
it
one,
busted
yeah.
their pipes in the
Yeah.
pool, and we were responsible.
You know,
And
to
the first
that
to
point,
admit it.
last week, I thought that was the thing that struck me the most, was when you talked about rupturing their pipe, and then the consulting insurance company, it was like, well, they submit the charges and your insurance company sues, and it was such an arcane
Well,
procedure.
well, in the first place,
It
it
sounds
was
so adversarial,
Yeah.
that that's one of the things I really would like, of all things, that might make it easy
Yeah.
for you all, is if there was a little bit more streamlined, less adversarial, let the insurance companies battle it out type of procedure.
And in that
I'm not
case,
sure there is.
and in that case, just so you know, our blaster said exactly, that's why I've got this, when my blood runs cold. They said, I'm sorry, our blast met state code, it couldn't have been us.
Right, right.
And I'm going, oh, please.
So having had that experience, I
Well, you wouldn't
absolutely
hire
understand where
that
you're
one
coming
again,
from,
would you?
but, you know.
See, I'm looking at it.
But on the other hand, I do
So
think
that's
that the
it.
planning board is, we've really, I think, adhered to best practices within the limits of what we are able to do.
Yeah, that's what I do.
You know, we're sort of now.
This is the thing,
Yeah.
what we're trying to do is facilitate a negotiation, because we really don't have, we're not on firm ground here with respect to
I know
making requirements. But we are asking people to try and reach an accommodation.
I agree. What I'm trying to get is if there's an agreement, I've heard agreement here, but that's sort of, I know, I don't think you can make it a condition of blasting, but at least you can codify that this was the agreement, this is what was made, and going forward, this is the understanding of the planning board, and for that matter, the blaster.
Well, this is going to go in our minutes.
Yeah, good.
And it's on the table.
Diana's got it, town's got it, oh my God, no denying what's going on.
Right, but
And you have all these witnesses.
I don't know about the other.
That's kind of what this is about.
Are you thinking of doing a baseline survey yourselves, or?
What, I called my insurance company, and they said, take your own video, get as many photographs as you can. I can submit that to Chaplin, so that we have the same information. Originally, when we were discussing with the blaster, who had presented the last two meetings, he said we needed two seismographs because we had two conditions. Now I see that the blast report we get one. So I'm concerned about that, simply because the house responds differently on fill. So
That's a reasonable request. It sounds reasonable to me. They have two different foundation conditions, so wouldn't you put two seismographs on their house to read the two different conditions?
We would typically put it at the closest location to the blast.
okay, are you familiar with the discussions that we've had in the
I
past?
know your
I
house.
didn't hear,
I'm on fill, and I'm directly on the ledge. I have a crawl space, like the Garrity's, in my original house. The addition that was placed in the 70s is on fill. That's the swimming pool that had this pipe snap. But I am concerned because there's,
What's the extra cost, Andy?
It's, well, the issue is,
We're already going over the four-man limit.
Yeah, we got four,
we've got
so-
five. So what's an extra cost?
Yeah.
Just give me a number.
it's going to be a blaster at $95 an hour and a seismograph at whatever, $80 a day.
$1,000?
Yeah.
Oh.
okay.
All right.
Quick question for you. They're taking pictures, video, they're taking additional pictures and video. What do you want to see on that video? I mean, does someone have to hold up a ruler, or?
No,
I
just
mean,
just the
my
video
father-
itself, but we need a date stamp so we know it's a pre-existing
Well, any
condition.
digital camera comes with that.
Right, just make sure
But not
that's
on the
turned on.
image, but on the file.
Yeah, and if we could, get those submitted to Ken, that'd be good too. And then we need to know as we go on, if there's an issue, which I'm sure you'll bring to our attention, but, we'd like to know about it immediately.
Do you actually put your prints, staple your prints next to the cracks, so that people can see, you've got 1,000 cracks in your house, Jimmy. How are you going to be able to monitor one's gone bigger all of a sudden unless you have a print right next to it with almost a size? I mean, it's...
Yeah, it's just a video, it's a videotape.
What happens if
That means you're going to be videotaping every day. I mean, that's
Yeah.
physical impossibility.
It is.
Is it individual photographs?
There's individual.
That's what I think I would want. Be the individual.
That's what you'll get.
And Jim and Melissa, the wetter has offered to have a couple of Wayne's guys help you remove for a day, remove paintings and vehicles if that's a reasonable compromise.
I don't think so.
Unless you
Because
can
it's
build a
gotta
garage
be,
with it.
gotta be wrapped up. It's glass, it's priceless stuff. It's gotta be done by a mover, wrapped in bubble wrap as movers do. sorry, not by developers, construction help.
It's a nice offer.
Rough-handed.
I'll make that offer.
Yeah, look at his
I
fingers.
thanked them, I said, thank you very much, very
So-
nice.
The Quinn's, do you have a baseline survey in progress, or?
We had Mr. Falvey come, and I think that the concern that was expressed last time was that when the Garrity's had talked to Chubb, that they said that the biggest issue is in the attics and chimneys, which Mr. Falvey never attempted to go up, and it's almost like a third vacant story in our house. So we will be having an independent survey done.
I think it would be good if we could establish a time frame so that we're not
Yeah.
putting the blast company on indefinite limbo. If everybody thinks that they could have their survey to Ken Stevens' team by, say, the next week,
Well,
is a week too short?
Well, it is, because we changed our vacation plan so that we could be here during the blasting in March, was when we thought it would be happening, so we're going on vacation for the next week, so maybe if it could be the third week in February, we can get it by then.
Or we can send someone up there to take it.
10 days.
10
Yes,
days?
you can give them, send someone up there to take it. Because really, from what I understand, talking to Mr. Smith, the concern, if you have a concern in the attic, it's the chimney, because the wood, the rest of the wood, that's not going to move. If you have problems with the wood, it means your foundation's falling apart at that point. So it's really just the chimney. Someone can just take photographs of the chimney. John's laughing at me, so I may be missing something.
Wow.
He knows more about it than I do.
Foundation falling apart is,
No, but I'm
we
saying.
don't talk about that.
No, but what I'm saying is there's not going to be any problem with the wood up in your attic. It's just,
I'm not worried about my attic.
Yeah,
So,
the chimney is really the only thing you have to photograph, my understanding.
Yeah, it's the masonry.
Can we get Falvey back?
Yeah, we can get Falvey back.
That's in his best interest.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we leave Friday. Friday morning.
Thursday,
Thursday.
Thursday. Yeah, okay.
so,
Thursday morning.
All right. So I think oh, yes.
Michelle Ryan from 4 Hidden Road. I have no idea. I wasn't home when they came to do the video. If we don't have my chimney in the video, can we add me on for Thursday?
Sure, let me just make sure I have the names correct. What's your name, sir?
Dan Quinn.
I think it's on your list. I think they both are.
You, ma'am?
Michelle Ryan, 4 Hidden.
And we have your contact information, I believe.
Yeah, and if you've already done the chimney, that's fine. I don't know if you have or not.
Okay, I'll make sure we check with Mr. Falvey and see what he has on record and get back to you.
Well,
If not, we'll get him back out there.
on the way out, we'll make sure we have the right contact.
No, he's been over there, but he never went up in there. I don't
But
know.
there's contact to get in your house up there.
Yeah. Thursday
All right.
morning.
I think we have a working arrangement. The last thing anybody sitting in this room wants is another meeting after the fact where people are saying, there's damage and people aren't stepping up to the plate. So I think the baseline is the key, and we'll hope for the best.
So I just have a question, trying to wrap up the documentation here. We have the January 30th letter from Main Drilling and Blasting to Ken Stevens. Should this be modified to clearly state that they will receive any proper documentation from the abutters for inclusion in the pre-blast survey and for the additional seismograph at 21 Hidden?
Yes.
And then have
Andy,
that
can you take care of that?
just resubmitted to us so we have that on file.
Yep.
Good point.
We'll get that back to you tomorrow.
Oh, and here's for your file, the permit. And
Okay, thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mike. I could
You
snow
guys
day
get too many of them.
tomorrow. Could snow day tomorrow.
Catch them way out.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, you have 781-894, girls off 9799.
Myself,
I'm bringing all this.
We would take care of it. Excuse me, Michelle. I just want to make sure I have the right information. Your cell or your number is 978-860-1677? 460, yes, that's what I thought. Just keep going.
And they'll be able to get into mine.
You may have already done it, and it's perfectly fine, I just don't know.
We'll verify. We'll verify. Thank
I
you.
do have a third floor that's finished.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
That's where I am.
Jay, this is only gonna be 10 minutes, right? 5 minutes?